Hello and welcome to Driven by Doing podcast. Today we have Alexander Grant. Alex, welcome to the show Driven by Doing.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So Alex is a program manager at Google and he's also founder and blogger at Tech Job Vets. There's a lot of stories that I heard about you and I've seen a lot of things that you do on LinkedIn and I was super fascinated with your story and definitely wanted to deep dive into it. So let's begin and share your journey on our podcast today. So
Yeah.
where did it all started for you, Alex?
Yeah. So I think the most important starting place was probably when I was a very young kid. There was eventually, I grew up with my grandparents and eventually we got a little Apple computer. And just in learning how to use that and finding all the different things that I could do with a computer, before even having internet, that's where my initial appreciation for tech and what it can provide as a window to the world is. So that's where I really started. I grew up more and more interested in tech, in computers, in the internet, in software. And as I sort of started to try to figure out what I wanted to do in school or wanted to do with the rest of my life, I knew that opportunity for me would probably be in the tech space because it was one of the parts of my childhood that sort of made me want to achieve. Just my interest in technology and what it could do made me want to learn, made me want to use it in order to accomplish more. So that's where I started loving tech and learning about tech. I ended up going to school at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, because I was also very interested in having a career in the military in my young days as well. So when I went to West Point, I majored in information engineering, which is all about using technology to solve problems of different kinds. And then when I when I graduated the academy and went into the Army, I went into the transportation field, but tech and sort of the leveraging of that in order to be successful, it stayed a theme of what I could do and what made me successful while I was in the military. There were several projects and problems that I worked on where I took maybe some novel uses of technology and was able to accomplish things that I didn't think that I'd be able to. So then I continued developing this appreciation of tech. And once it became apparent to me that I wasn't going to stay in the military for a full career, that's when I started looking and trying to figure out, well, how does someone go from being in the military to working at tech companies? And that is where the real beginning of true challenge started happening for me. And when I started learning the value of just knowledge and mentorship, because there was so much about the industry that I really didn't understand at all. So getting out of the military was a scary transition because I was going from a place of a lot of job security and predictability to a place where nobody was really writing out the path for how to get to tech, or what is even a job in a tech company. All of that stuff I didn't really understand. So I worked a lot with recruitment companies that typically work with military officers who are going into more traditional type of industries, manufacturing, doing sales for various companies, stuff like that. I gained a lot of practice in interviewing and a lot of practice at resume work, but still not a lot of access to true tech opportunities. There were a few, but most of the opportunity that I got in terms of interviewing at tech companies was really just through my own scheming and looking and finding people to ask them, like, what do you do, or what does this company do, and then figuring out what kind of jobs were there. Since I didn't have an education in software engineering, like I've never been sort of specifically trained in coding or anything, I knew that there are a ton of jobs that need to support the software engineers. But most people look at the industry as well, either you write code or you're not working in tech. So I had to do a lot of just discovering through my networks and through meeting people who were also going through the same trial, what it meant to work in tech and what jobs really existed there. Uh, it took me it took me a couple years to really get to where I wanted to be in terms of working in tech. When I left the military, I had a very profound desire to work at Google, which is where I work now. But in the early goings, I wasn't getting a lot of response in terms of applying or recruiters and someone helping me apply and all of that. So uh, it was definitely a struggle for me. I definitely had backup options, but something about the mission and what I had learned through informational interviews about the atmosphere and sort of the grassroots nature of problem solving at Google that really attracted me. So I knew that I wanted to keep trying, but I also, had other jobs that I took along the way. So I left the military. I worked at Amazon for a year and a half. After I worked at Amazon, I went to another startup company called Uma. Well, they were a startup at the time. They work in the voice over IP segment. I went to Uma, and it was only a few months at Uma before I finally got the opportunity to come to Google. But along that 2-year period that I was out of the military, I was applying to Google once every month or a couple months that entire time. Like it had been a goal the entire way. And I told myself, I just need to earn the right credentials, find the right people, learn the right things that are going to give me the exposure and the expertise necessary to really get through this interviewing, through this hiring process.
So you
Uh,
always wanted to go into Google, right? Like you had that goal in mind, and then like you came out of the military, and then you're trying to get there, and you're almost applying every single month. I think
yeah,
a lot of us might left it in the middle, saying that hey, this is very hard to do it, and I didn't really know what to do, but you kept on going after it. And meanwhile, you're also like having other opportunities. You're taking other opportunities that came your way as well. Sometimes a lot of us always wanted to have that one thing that we wanted, but overlooks all the opportunities that might come along our way.
yes,
That no, tell us about taking those initial opportunities that really
yes.
helped you to get to Google.
Yes, that is such an important part of all of this, and part of the reason why I'm so active nowadays and trying to mentor people who are specifically making that military to tech transition. You can easily lose sight of all the rest of the opportunities if you think you know that this one is the great thing. For me, it did work out that I really do enjoy working at Google and the people that I work with and the problems that I work with. But there are so many things that I could have done in so many places where I could have, put myself into somewhere where I could have impact. Thinking back to, part of the reason I went to the military was, not because I wanted to save the world or not because I thought that I could individually protect America or people. It's because I felt that in a leadership position overseas, I could make some small decision or do something right that would make the difference for a soldier or make the difference for a person. Just taking that and applying that to the rest of my career, when opportunities present themselves and you can do something, whether or not you know that you can do it, you may have an incredible opportunity to just touch someone, meet someone, impact someone. And that's what I discovered in sort of those backup options. When I went to Amazon, I worked in the warehouse. So I was in Amazon fulfillment. And I'll be honest, there was at the time a pretty bad reputation in terms of Amazon fulfillment. And a lot of people thought that I was sort of crazy for going there versus some other places that I found through recruitment firms. But what I saw with Amazon was, there's something that's semi-revolutionary happening here in terms of the logistics and the efficiency. And they're doing a lot of things right to be able to sort of have this presence and power within sort of online shopping. And I learned a lot about just technology, the way that things work outside of the military. But I also got to meet a lot of people that I'm still friends with, people that I helped learn something back at Amazon and they eventually got a promotion, or people that I met and mentored a little bit at Amazon, and now they work somewhere else and they've self-actualized better because of interactions we've had. So I try not to lose sight of those things, but it's very easy to. So I think, yeah, a good message out of this conversation, and I think other ones that you've had, are really about that, not discounting opportunity where that actually comes along, right? And then when I left Amazon and I took the job at UMA, it was not something that I could have gotten coming straight out of the military. It was a highly unstructured, brand new position. And sure, I did a good job of doing the application and interviewing and all that good stuff. But just to be at the point where I would have had the confidence to do that job and the credentials to sort of get in the room with the VPs at UMA and do that interview, I think that a lot of that is owed to just making that choice to kind of stick with the tech industry, go to Amazon, learn things that are in sort of that space, versus giving up back when I wasn't getting the Google callbacks and kind of going into something that would have been more traditional and less compelling.
Wow, that's again like taking those opportunities, early opportunities, and you learned so many great things that you applied to ultimately get to your goal. I think that was fascinating to see. And
Yeah.
you talked about like how important it is networking. It is to network while you are learning through that process. Like, how did you begin your journey in networking with other people? Who did you like reach out to people on like LinkedIn and other tools, like trying to
Mhm.
approach them and ask them their experience so that like you can get better over a period of time? Like, what was that journey look like for you?
Yes. So I should start by saying that networking is like, at least it was one of the worst things, one of the worst parts of my skill set possible coming out of the military. When I was in the Army, it was easy to know who to talk to about something in order to deal with some problem. And it was also easy to refer to some kind of standard procedure for doing something. So you could solve your problems by referring to procedures and manuals and history and stuff like that. Um, Networking is a whole different beast, where not only do you have to do it in a way that sort of is not wasteful and is sort of like on target for you, but you also have to potentially overcome a lot of personal obstacles just with the engagement with people. For myself, I always felt like I was bothering somebody to be doing some networking. But what I learned through the military recruitment firms that I worked with was that, oh, okay, if I run into people and I talk to them and I stay in touch with them, they will eventually teach me something down the line, or they'll have some opportunity that comes up later that they might reach back to me about. And that was really the first time that I sort of learned from real results that networking has some big impact on the job search and everything that you do. I was still pretty bad at it, but where my basic strategy for networking when I was coming out of the military was, LinkedIn, the traditional social network, LinkedIn, find people who work at the company, send them a message, see if they'll have an informational interview with you. That was my main strategy. So through that, I met several different people who were veterans that worked at Google, and they told me a bit about their path. Uh, but I never really took it to the next level, which is really asking people to sponsor you and
Mm.
showing people what you can really do. And that's where those mentor relationships kind of really, they take on a whole new dimension. If you can not just find the people to meet and people to learn from, but you can also find either those people or others who will essentially sponsor you in front of other organizations, hey, I talked to this gal the other week and she seems really great for this work that we don't have anybody covered down on, that type of thing. I didn't learn that until much later. But that is where the networking and the mentorship relationships really take on like a whole new meaning and can really make a difference for people. So I try to tell folks that find me and that I mentor, you don't just want this bit of information I'm giving you that might help you in an interview. You also want to know what it is that I do, how your skill set matches up with the type of things we do over here. And you want to make sure to communicate that to me so that if I remember you and we're maintaining this relationship, if something comes up that matches with you that fits, then you'll be there in the back of my head when the time comes. So that's phase 2 of really learning how to network properly. But that phase 1 that I was doing up until the point that I got to Google, yeah, was pretty much the traditional advice of kind of put yourself out there and see what kind of conversation happens.
Wow, that's amazing. Great tips on networking, taking that networking to the next level and identifying who can sponsor you, because I think that's when you can show your potential to
Yes.
really help them understand why you need that particular job or an internship. And I think that's a great advice. And now that we talked about networking piece of it, you also are a blogger, and you actually founded tech jobs vets, right? So tell us that story, why did you begin that, Alex, and how are you working towards helping veterans, especially during this using that project?
Yeah, so the one thing that I think happens to a lot of folks who are in the military and transitioning out into the civilian world, you remember a lot of this kind of thanks for your service, and what you do is so brave and great, and all of that stuff. But then you don't really know how to say, I was in the military and that's why I will be good for this job that is not in the military. That piece you don't really get. And the Army and all the services, they do provide transition classes for someone who's getting out, and they'll tell you how to do a resume, and they will teach you about networking and all of that good stuff. But all of that stuff is coming from the military authority and all of their procedures. And you do those classes at a time where you're just focused on getting out, to be quite honest. So once I did finally make it to a point where I thought, okay, I think that I finally sort of successfully transitioned, I looked back over the experience and I thought it was hard for me to find people that I thought that I could trust to just, tell them my story and get whatever advice that they had and just get some direction in figuring out how to find a job, how to understand what that job actually means or what that job is, and then how to go through an application process, what to expect of interviews, all that stuff. So I thought maybe I have enough information and enough experience to this point to provide a little bit of that to people who are doing the transition now. And that's where the idea came from. I thought a lot of people helped me in these really small little ways in the interactions that I had with them up until coming to Google. And I know that, these are some of the most highly coveted positions that are out there. It's going to be very tough for military veterans without, any teaching of networking and things like that to get the jobs they really want in tech. So I just created this as a way for me to put myself out there, expose myself to people who might want to hear from my story and similar stories from others, and just make that as available as possible to people who are doing the transition. So the idea with Tech Job Vets was really always, as I met people who went through the transition and sort of eventually made it, to put their stories up as well and show folks who are military transition type, this can be done, and it can be done in sort of the non-traditional ways. The traditional way is get the most high-powered MBA or tech-related masters that you can, and then there will be some natural networking and opportunity that comes out of it. Well, the other way is to just really look at what you like, what you appreciate, what you want to do, and then find where that exists in an industry that essentially serves all people. There's something for everybody in the industry. And I just knew that I wouldn't be able to communicate it well by having a million one-on-ones with people. So I thought, a good way for me to reach as many people as possible with just my story would be this blog. So that's the main purpose of it. And then secondarily, it is so that people can find me and contact me, so that I can create relationships with folks who are just coming out of the military and kind of push them along with some personal guidance if they want it.
That is such a great initiative, Alex, and thanks for doing such a great initiative for helping other veterans. And in fact, I'm seeing a very similar trend. In fact, students coming out of colleges, they had the same trouble of translating their experiences, whether they worked anywhere during their college days, and then trying to translate how that skills that they developed over the years
Yep.
into a real job skill set. So that was
Yep.
The problem for them as well. So what are some of the tips that you would tell anybody, a professional who is looking for a career transition, or a student who is just coming out of college? How can they help themselves by creating those stories?
Yeah. To start off with, vulnerability and honesty, they're super important. First off with yourself, honesty with yourself about, what am I oriented towards? Do I really like this? Do I think that I want this? It doesn't need to be perfect, but you do need to have a true dialogue with yourself about what you want to do and what would compel you to sort of be the best person that you are. So it starts with that. And then it is allowing yourself to trust other people and putting yourself out there. You have to be okay maybe reaching out to a lot of people and either being rejected or hearing nothing back. And you need to, brush that stuff off, so that when you do have the interactions with people and they do talk to you, you're willing to be vulnerable and just be honest about who you are and what your feelings really are. It will come out in mentorship conversations eventually, or interview processes eventually, if you're essentially just not being true to yourself, especially when companies have very serious and in-depth interviewing processes like my current one. So really that sort of talking to yourself and figuring out what you want, and then when you get in a conversation with someone, being willing to share something that is really you, those are the two starting places.
Yeah.
These do kind of assume that you already have the general confidence just to reach out and make the contact in at first, which is not a good assumption to make, because I think a lot of us lack that at the beginning as well. Especially maybe in some of our in some minority communities and stuff like that. I know that I grew up in a very old school household where, we were kind of taught to be quiet and respect authority, and you just put your head down and work. And if you work twice as hard as everyone else around you, then opportunity will eventually come. Well, what I have learned is that what you really need to do is stick your head up and stick your neck out. And you need to to stomach a little bit of risk, in the fear of rejection or the fear of failure, to actually find the thing that's going to make you want to do what you're doing, make you want to get up in the morning, stuff like that. So, I would tell people, if you don't have that confidence where you think you do deserve to be on LinkedIn hitting everybody up for informational interviews, then you got to find that first too.
That's such an amazing advice for everybody who's listening and watching our show, Alex. Thanks for sharing those great tips. And now coming to your experience, like working with like several non-profit organizations as well. Like while you're working on all this stuff, like why do you like want to mentor others, and what are you getting out of it? It's also very important that like I always see mentoring as a two-way process. Like
Yes.
some people think that, hey, like if you're a mentor, it's only top down approach. Sometimes I feel that like, hey, you can go bottom up as well, right? Tell me
Yes.
about your experience so far in the mentoring space.
Yeah, that is actually super important because a part of, the having a part of my honest conversation that I have to have with myself is, what do I personally take from having these interactions and spending the time doing this? And I think that it really goes to how I was, when I was explaining when I was a kid and when I went to the military because I thought that, I could just help the guy beside me. It's really a lot more of that. I get some opportunity with people that meet me where I can really refer them to a position, or I can put them in a position to sort of get some job that they really like. But beyond that, you get this opportunity to just learn about another person, to hear a story that is unique, sort of an original story, and you have an opportunity to just make like a little bit of impact here and there, to push somebody along, and then you can sort of live vicariously through their achievements beyond that. So as an example, uh, a good friend of mine who basically we just became friends because he reached out for mentorship and we just kind of had a lot in common. Uh, he's going through a process where he's trying to get a job that he's been waiting for and wanting for a very long time. And there have been so many little opportunities along the way where I was able to say, what I think might be good for the resume, or did you remember to put that in the resume? Once we get to the point where he's nailed that interview and gotten into that position, his life will change in a very major way. And having been able to just kind of help a little bit in like a positive thing happening, I think that I get a lot of value from that just personally. Uh, when people make it, you can celebrate those wins with them, and it sucks when they don't, or if they're having a hard time. But regardless of where the results go with someone's career search or any of that thing, you never lose sort of just the basic human companionship that also existed over the course of that relationship. So for me, the mentorship relationship is sort of like a uniquely productive friendship. And for some people need and want more support than others in terms of mentoring, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, I just went through some experiences, and because I went through those things, I might be able to make some piece of this better for someone else. And I definitely feel like a sense of achievement having at least tried.
Hmm.
So that's what I get out of mentorship. And yeah, it's part of that reason that I maintain the blog now is I just want, more people to meet and talk to and be able to be useful to them. I guess I just want to be useful. And mentoring is a great way to be useful.
Yeah, like it is same way with me as well, and I get so much motivated seeing like whoever I'm mentoring, like the way that like sometimes I learn so much from them. It is both ways, and like just hearing all
Yes.
those stories from you, I think it's just great that like there are so many people who are just thinking just like you and me, who are like wanting to give back and like make that positive impact. And especially given the current environment, again, we needed all the support that we can get and also give others the support that they need as well.
Yeah, and there's one last thing that I would probably add to it. if I am able to successfully mentor, then the follow-on impacts that happen just within industry, they're impossible to measure. When I first got to Google, there was no other Black people on my team, just for example, and I kind of thought, well, there are kind of no Black people around here anywhere. And then I also thought, well, hey, a lot of sort of eligible Black professionals are coming out of the officer ranks of the military, for example, and nobody's really kind of taking advantage of that pipeline of really good sort of diverse talent. So I got involved sort of internally at Google in different ways to help get people through that transition that were specific to Google as well, because the more diverse that we make these teams, the better these teams become in terms of being able to solve problems and having unique perspectives and all of that. So, maybe a part of it is a little bit of selfishness where I think, well, if I mentor well and sort of create kind of diverse groups of people around me, that I'll also be in higher functioning teams and be able to do more. I think that's a part of it as well. It's important for those of us who come from non-traditional backgrounds to be out here in front and showing that it is possible, and then it ultimately benefits industry and then benefits customers.
That is such a great, amazing insight, because for the last few interviews, actually, I was talking with a lot of experts who are helping with the diversity strategies.
Yep.
And I talked with heads of diversity and inclusion at their companies. And it was just fascinating that how companies are leveraging. And this is just the beginning. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And the way that companies need to leverage their sources to have that pipeline of people, especially from different diversities, and especially US is such a great country with a lot of different diverse people.
Yes.
So that's the power, right? The people are its power, and I think this is just one advantage, one big advantage for the United States. People from all around the world come here because it attracts
Yeah.
the best talent, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's just that taking advantage of the resources that they already have is such an important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the representation makes a difference for so many different reasons, and sometimes it just makes a difference in the understanding that a company may have of its own customers. But there is also, kind of a hidden, a hidden benefit of that representation, where if other people see that, then they can see themselves there. And it makes people be more willing to take risks or be vulnerable or to do something that they've never done before, if they don't see it as like an exclusive club of a certain set of folks with certain credentials and all of that stuff. So filtering out or getting rid of some of the maybe unhelpful elitism that comes with some tech companies, stuff like that, is kind of a side benefit of being out there mentoring and having, intimate one-to-one conversations with candidates and groups of people that are trying to make that change.
Awesome. So I'm sure you might have interviewed a lot of folks even at Google as well. What is your favorite question to ask people to really assess them, Alex?
Yeah, so there's one of the questions that I get a lot, because I work at Google, is about, are they going to ask like a tricky type of question that's going to, and that's a reputation from quite some time ago, but people still worry about it. My favorite question when I'm doing interviews, and this is assuming that I get assigned to this particular area of interviewing, because we could go into it, but there are several factors you have to be interviewed about, and some questions work for some factors. But I really like asking people to call out something that they appreciate as a product, like one of their favorite products, something of that nature. It may or may not be related to Google if I'm interviewing for Google. And then I ask them, what would you do if X happened? because what I like to do is see if someone has an appreciation for what the technology does for them, and see if they also have an ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes. So I give sort of like a really easy, what's your favorite product? And I say, okay, well, what's your favorite feature of that product? And I say, well, what if that feature didn't exist and it couldn't because of X? How would you replace it? What if a customer then said, hey, this doesn't work, it did X? What would you do? So I guess it's kind of cheating because it's a series of questions, not just one. But it is my favorite line of questioning to put somebody in sort of the shoes of their prospective customer, and see how well they are at thinking like that other person. I think that sort of the empathy that comes out of that line of questioning is underappreciated in terms of what makes you successful in the industry. It's not just being able to make a dashboard or analyze data or write code. It's being able to sort of like understand the person who wants to use the thing, understand the person that needs the help, and understand the similarities that you have with that person. So I really love some version of that line of questioning where I can throw a bunch of customer problems in front of someone and just see how well do you think like someone who is not you.
Hmm. Wow, that's such a great question, or a series of questions, Alex. What would you tell anybody whose dream company is Google and they want to get a job at Google, right? Like what tips do you tell them?
Yeah. Part of it depends on how long they've been in their hunt for the job and everything, but the most important thing that I can tell people is there is no resource more important than time, and there is no replacement for people and networking. So what I mean by that is, what I mean by the first part of it is, you have a limited amount of time, either to the end of your job search or just to the, end of your life, or to the end, when you expect to retire. You can't get back time. So procrastinating is one of the biggest enemies that you could possibly have in terms of getting the job done. From my personal experience, I know, because I did not network hard enough to get into my Google job until I was almost ready to quit going for it at the very end. The second part of that, which was what? The first part was time is precious, basically. And the second part is networking. There's no replacement for it. There's no replacement for the human element of the job search, of the hunt, of the learning. You can't be scared to do those things. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to accept rejection from people who you may want the help from, but they don't have the time for it. But you have to do it. So it pairs up with that first aspect of not wasting time. You don't want to waste your own time. You want to put yourself out there, but you can't do it on your own. So you have to seek out whatever tools there are, whatever best practices there are for making those human connections and sort of getting those mentors and getting those sponsors. The reason that those are the two most important things to me is because those were the two sort of biggest changes to my job search that made it from being a depressing thing to a positive thing. I was applying to Google once a month, but I had stopped doing informational interviews, so I wasn't learning more. I was just doing more applications. It wasn't helping. Finally, when I got to a point where I didn't want to keep doing the same cycle anymore, I told myself, look, what do you have to lose? If you give up, then you lose everything. But what do you have to lose from just putting yourself out there and trying to talk to more people? And that was the day that I contacted 50 different people on LinkedIn
Wow.
with the same ask, the same message, just like a canned message. And one of those people responded. That
Wow.
one response is the reason that I got the job. If if not for that one moment, that one connection, I have no idea where I would be. I would definitely not be working in tech anymore. I would definitely not be doing something that I felt was compelling on a regular basis. I think that I would have went into a cycle of settling that would have been really unhealthy and just ultimately a dead end. So what I learned from that was I needed to be more brave, more courageous about putting myself out there, meeting people, just talking to them, and to not take no for an answer, to feel like I deserved it just as much as everybody else that was there. You can't really replace that feeling. The confidence that I probably didn't really learn as a kid sort of started coming to me once I made that realization.
And a lot of times, a lot of us don't realize that we need to keep on going no matter what. I think it's
Yes,
just that, just from hearing you a while ago, is that you kept on going, and you have literally sent messages to maybe even hundreds of people over a period of time, and
yes,
just getting that one connection that made a lot of difference in your life today. And
yes,
sometimes it's just that putting ourselves in the shoes, right? Like every single day, because every day is a new opportunity, right?
yep,
Sometimes I think, like, taking every day as that next step towards that one goal. I think it's just beautiful. You are truly driven by doing, Alex. And I really appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing your journey and so many great advice for everybody who is listening to this show. And I wish you all the very best for all the greatest things that you're doing. And this is just your beginning. I'm sure, like, you have got a long road to go. And
yeah,
especially, like, we need a lot of people like you who really, like, wanted to help others and mentor others, because I feel that, because you're doing it, because you believe that you have been given a lot, and then now you're trying to share that positive to the world. And I
yep,
think everybody are in the same boat, who's, like, trying to get help, and especially during these very difficult times. And thanks for everything that you're doing, and for all the there will be a lot of success for all the things that you're doing. And do you have anything that you finally wanted to share with our audience as well?
yeah. I think just the best thing that I could say is don't quit. Um, and I don't mean that just in the face of disappointment. I mean that in the face of success as well. If I mentor someone or if I'm helping someone go through a transition and they do get a job that is great for them and they love it after 6 months, I tell them, okay, well, don't forget how much you can do and what else you can do and what is next. Because if you if you stagnate, if you give up, then you basically are just cutting yourself off from an opportunity. Don't take the opportunities away from yourself. Don't quit. If you think you love what you do and you think you like what you do, you should still keep your head up. There's an unlimited amount of problems out there that need to be solved, an unlimited amount of ideas that need to be fleshed out. So don't be content with where you are and what you've accomplished to this point. Always listen to yourself and think, what more could I do to, be the person that I really want to be out in this world? So don't give up even if you think you finished the game.
That's such an amazing advice, and thanks for leaving our audience with such a great insight. And thanks for once again coming onto the show. Where can people connect with you if they would like to, like, reach out to you, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. So easiest way probably is to go to the site techjobvets.com. I have contact information on there where anyone could get directly in contact with me. You can also, I'm Alex Grant. You can find me on LinkedIn if that's easier for folks. And yeah, go out there and find every type of person that is willing to spend some time communicating with you and just see. So yeah, go to Tech Job Vets and shoot me a note. And if you need anything and I can provide it, then I will definitely get back to you from there.
Thank you so much, Alex. Listeners, definitely reach out to Alex, and he's a great mentor who has helped so many students and professionals to transition their career. And I wish you all the very best, Alex. Thanks for coming on to the show today.
Thank you. Have a good one, Venki.
Thank you.